I think some of you were there last year, and maybe you remember the arguments we had, because last year, when we came at Marxism, we came on the back of a huge, massive movement against the attack on pensions. Millions of demonstrators for months, millions of strikers. And just before we came here, and after the movement around pensions, there were riots in more than 500 cities in France, from the youth in the popular neighborhoods against protesting against the killing of a young guy by the police. And when we came last year, of course, we were very enthusiastic. But at the same time, if I remember, we warned, because that's what we were arguing about in France as well. We were warning that this movement didn't stop the fascists. And this movement didn't stop the fascists and didn't begin to stop the fascists. Even the fascists were stronger, which looks mad at the end of this movement than at the beginning of this movement. Millions of workers on strike. Hundreds of cities rioting against the police and against the racist police. And Marine Le Pen on the top in the polls. And we were warning the reason why it was this situation. We said the general basis is what we were calling polarization. A situation where you have a move to the left and a move to the right on the same time. But there were subjective reasons why it was the case. And the subjective reason was that during the movement against pensions, the trade union leaderships, the leadership of the left, didn't want to argue against racism and against fascism. I give you just one example. On May Day last year, in the middle of the movement around the question of pensions, the Rassemblement National organized a national rally in Le Havre. We said that last year. I don't know if you remember. Le Havre is a port in France with a strong docker unionized movement. And so with La Marge et Solidarité, we addressed all the movements, but mainly the trade unions. And we said, we can't let the fascists use the May Day, the Workers' Day, the Solidarity, International Solidarity Day. They can't use this to organize a meeting. It's one of the strongest place of the working class. And so we should do a national question of this May Day and bring some delegation from everywhere to go to Le Havre to stop the fascists to organize these meetings. They said no. The most important thing is to organize big meetings everywhere and so on. That's the way. And, just around the question of pensions, that's the best way to fight fascism. When there were the riots, we warned again. We said, it's brilliant. That's an opportunity to connect the power of the organized working class we have seen in the street with the youth in the neighborhood, who are fighting the state, who were burning some police stations and so on. The position of the left was to say, and they produced a large call, calling to stop the violence. They didn't say stop the violence of the police. They say stop the violence. So they were not supporting the youth. The result we have today is a result of this policy. The fascists are stronger now than they were before the movement. They were reinforced and so on. But keep in mind that it doesn't mean polarization. That's why I wanted to insist on this. Polarization is not finished. It's not because they had a huge success on the electoral grounds that the situation is finished. And I will come at the end of this introduction about the situation right now and why there is no symmetry. Symmetry? No, symmetry is like people dead. And even in the last 15 days, we have seen that. The street is our. In the street, we are the stronger. We have seen that in the last 15 days. So the movement is still there. Just I show you the magazine we are producing. It was just before the election result, European election result, and the decision from Macron to dissolve the parliament. And we are saying Palestine, Kanaki, anti-fascism, trans riposte. This world is old, hope is young. Why we were saying that? Because even this year, even before the European elections, there were movements, a big movement of the youth. It was difficult to build the solidarity movement in France. But after Rafah, suddenly the movement just started to go up, and mainly inside the youth. There were a connection because maybe you heard about it. There is a colony, a French colony. We call it Kanaki because that's the name of the people there, the people they give. It's maybe more the name of New Caledonia because that's the French colonialist name for this place. And even Macron said it was an insurrection in Kanaki, and a movement of solidarity with the Kanaks developed in France, connecting with the solidarity movement with Palestine. That was before the elections. And began in the youth an anti-fascist dynamic as well. That was what was happening, and it's still there. It's still there. The movement around pensions, the power of this movement is still there. The radicalization of the youth is still there. So keep that in mind, even when we talk about, all the difficulties we can have in this situation. And maybe you know it, Front Populaire, Popular Front, is a name of a coalition, an electoral coalition built by the organizations of the left, the parties, the trade unions, the main associations, right after the decision of Macron to dissolve the parliament and to organize on a short term some new elections. It refers explicitly to a period, a historical event that happened in France in the 30s. I should rather say that it refers to a limited and mythified version of what happened in France in the 30s. And this mythified version of the left, of the name used by the left as Front Populaire, this name was able, at least at the beginning, to capture the imagination of millions of people. And they were able to do this because this mythified version has been of Front Populaire, has been the one we have been taught in France, especially in the left, for dozens of years. So I'm going to give you this mythified version of Front Populaire. And you will see that it fits, this mythified version fits perfectly well the objective of the left coalition. This mythified version is this one. In May 1936, a coalition, an electoral coalition of the left won the election in France in a situation of deep economical and political crisis, in a situation where fascism was in power in Italy, where Hitler and the Nazis were in power in Germany. And this electoral coalition won the election. And still about the mythified version, which is partly true, but in the mythified version, this electoral coalition going to the government provided the workers with substantial advance, and really substantial advances. Rise in wages, rights for the trade unions, paid holidays. That's not, it's big. Paid holidays. Limitation of work time. It was limited to 40 hours a week, and forbidding the fascist organization. That is the mythified version of the left. You see, it fits very well the situation where there is a threat from the fascists and there is a coalition that the objective was, through the vote, to prevent the fascists to have a majority on the government in the elections. First round last week, next round tomorrow. So it fits very well the situation. And in this version, the driving force of unity, the driving force of the process explaining the victory, was the electoral unity of the organization. There are at least three main reasons why we should look a little bit more carefully about this version and the real story. The first one is that, incredibly enough, they never say the end of the story. And the end of the story, after the electoral victory, was a government turning more and more right-wing, attacking the workers, demoralizing the working class, but much more than that. In 1939, the same parliament decided to expel the communist MPs with the same law they had used to forbid the fascist organization. And in 1940, the same parliament without the communists voted to give full power to Maréchal Pétain to collaborate with the Nazi regime. They never say that. Which should be at least, one of the questions, it turned wrong. You say we are going to do the same. Why did it turn this way? The second reason is a more positive one. I said, in this version, everything, the driving force of the process are the leadership of the organization and the elections and the government. In fact, what we could call, and sometimes I call it like this, the Front Populaire period. Okay. The Front Populaire period, and that's okay, what I'm going to try to explain quickly, is a fucking more positive experience. You know, it was not just in May 1936. It was a period of at least, or I would say 4 years, where there were an alternative, where there were a fight between the leadership of the left and what happened on the ground. It didn't begin with an electoral campaign. And you know what? Sometimes, and I suspect that it's the same here and different countries, you know, you have in the left so many people, because they don't believe about the idea of self-emancipation of workers is the act of the workers themselves, because they don't think that the workers are able to emancipate and to change society. So the beginning of this process began 2 years before 1936. And it's very interesting, because it began not in a very strong working class, fighting, class struggle. Now, in a period where the trade unions were very weak, divided, the left was deeply divided, where the level of strikes and class struggle was historically low, and where the fascists were on the offensive. They were so much on the offensive that at the beginning of February 1934, they organized a demonstration, a violent demonstration, with tens of thousands of fascist activists in what was seen as an attempt coup against the parliament. There were 15 people who were dead this day during this event. This working class, who was not fighting for years, reacted very quickly. On 8th of February, there were demonstrations in 30 different cities against fascism. In the 12th of February, there were a general strike with 5 million workers on strike against fascism. Not about pensions, not about wages, against fascism, a political strike. There were demonstrations in 346 different cities. Everywhere, there were a big push toward unity between the very deeply divided organization. The places where the demonstration were the bigger were the places where, first, the trade unions were the stronger, and where the different trade unions decided against their leadership to organize the movement and the demonstration together. In weeks' time, there were some anti-fascist committees everywhere in France. Daniel Guérin, who maybe is best known about what he wrote around the question of fascism, but he was an activist, a revolutionary activist inside the Socialist Party at this time. He said that after some weeks, there were 3,000 different anti-fascist committees in France. These committees were not based on very radical position. Unity was organized against the fascists, and very moderate, you know, we are defending the Republic. That was the main content, against the fascists. Very defensive, very moderate. It doesn't mean that in the way they were doing, it was very moderate. Because they attacked, you know, the organized demonstration everywhere when the fascists wanted to come, to demonstrate, to organize a meeting, to break the meeting. to attack the fascists, to not to let them the street everywhere. There were confrontations and so on. That was, the first riposte of the working class was on the ground of unity and the fight against fascism. But it produced something. On this basis, the combativity, the confidence, the experience meant that, it didn't stay only on the grounds of the question of anti-fascism. Combativity was translated for the first time. There were some strikes, some new strikes, and so on. There were even in 1935 some insurrectional strikes in two cities, in Brest and in Toulon. It produced a pressure toward the trade union, and the two trade unions who were deeply splitted had to reunify to create one union. They went quickly. They were reunified at the end of 35, when there was the election in May 36. They went from 750,000 members to 1 million. They grew because of the process of unity. And there were a process of unity, pressure toward unity on the level of the political organization as well. I've not a lot of time. It was much more a paradox. And where the question of politically, the question of popular France is showing, I would say its limits. Because what happened with the question of alliance between the party preparing for the election, it means that it dried the anti-fascist activity to transfer it. The committees, anti-fascist committees, were transformed in pro-popular committees for the elections. And in reality, anti-fascist activities, specific activity against fascism, didn't recover after it. And it means that all the combativity of the workers were transferred from the ground of struggle, of fighting in every place. Unity of, class unity to fight. The bosses and the fascists was transferred to a support and the idea that a good government could do things for us. I have to finish. That's not the end of the story. The driving force was not finished. The electoral victory produced a surge of combativity and a surge of a process for weeks of mass strikes. It's the image of the Front Populaire as well. Strikes with occupation of the factories. What is very interesting, I'm going to say, maybe we'll have some questions and so on, but what is very interesting is that on February, on the anti-fascist activity, it was the core of organized working class that was the core of the initiative against the fascists. These organized militants were often soft-political militants inside the Socialist Party, inside the Communist Party, were the one who built, even were the channel to build the electoral victory in May 1936. The workers who went on strike on the back of the victory saying, it began the day after the victory. Now we have our government. The bosses, are frightened and so on. So take action. We want things now. This movement was a movement of a part of the working class that was not organized. It was in the sector where the trade union were really weak. And, I can't finish about all this, what it means, because it has a political, a positive thing. it shows this process of mass strike where you have different sectors, and the process is giving some confidence to even the sectors where the less organized sectors who are becoming, even at one phase of the movement, the most radical ones. But at the same time, politically, these people were not equipped to see the contradiction between what the government was doing and their revendication and their demands. And so it was, what happened is that, the government and the force of the Popular Front, and mainly the Communist Party, was essential to do it, was to break the strike, to break the dynamic of the strike. And when the dynamic of the strike was broken, it was not done like this in 1 week or 2 weeks. Even the conflictuality was again in 1937 and so on. But this time, the people were fighting in the defensive against the bosses and against their own governments. But it finished with a working class, a broken working class, demoralized, and a new rise of the fascists after 1938 and the end of the story, I said. So I have to admit that there is a quotation from Marx that I didn't understand, I never understood. I thought it's marvelous, but I didn't really understood. He say in the 18th Brumaire, he says something like, great events in history are coming twice. The first time as a tragedy, that was the 30s with the Popular Front. The second as a farce. I didn't know. It fits perfectly well what's happening in France with the Front Populaire now. Because the Front Populaire now was launched 3 weeks ago? I tell you, it still exists in the name. The coalition it's dead. It's already dead. This coalition was based on the idea that the only way to fight the fascists was a good program. Not to call people to action. Not to call people to fight fascism, to unite against fascism, but on program. To call people, go to vote, go to vote, go to vote. Not organize on your neighborhood. Not organize to fight. Go to vote. On the political base that our weapon is our program. This coalition after the first round and now has dropped its program to call to vote for Darmanin, the racist minister of the Macron government, who said that Marine Le Pen was too soft on Islamophobia and on the question of migrants. They dropped their program, call to vote on their candidate, to call to vote for Elizabeth Borne, the prime minister who organized, the attack on pensions. They dropped everything. They are dead. Now the question is what I said at the beginning. We have the chance, compared to the 30s, to have a movement of tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of workers, of young people who are radicalized, who are organized, who proved in the last 15 days that even if they were hoping for the Front Populaire, they were able to take the street. It happened nearly every day. We had this movement. Communist Party is a kind of party like Communist Party doesn't exist anymore as a bloc against radicalization and organization for the revolutionary and so on. So everything, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. It's very frightening, but we don't know what will be the result. Probably nobody will have the majority and will have a very unstable government, but on the condition of Emmanuel Macron, and supported by a large part, or at least a part, of the Front Populaire, always paralyzed by the idea that we have to vote even the law that we don't want, because if we are not doing it, it's the fascists will take the power. So, but in the street now, people are learning, and they are learning very quickly with what's happening right now.
I know that I wanted to say something at first, but
now next week we decided. Charlie was talking about Marge Solidarité. We had planned it before, but of course we transformed it. Last year, on the 14th of July, it's the National Day in France, the revolution in French Revolution. So every year now, it's the president défilé with the army and so on, with the French flags and so on and so forth. Last year, we organized on the same day an internationalist march, in another place in Paris, with the sans-papier movement, calling to everybody and so on. This year we had planned to do it anyway. Of course, it's in a new situation. So we're organizing it. What is good is that we succeeded, and we think there will be the solidarity movement with Kanaki involved in it. But already there is a Marge Solidarité, the migrants committees and so on. And the biggest, the more rooted, the most determined movement of solidarity with Palestine. We organize next Sunday, just 1 week after the election, and we have prepared with a different hypothesis, different results, a call to send to the press. We are mobilizing already to send to the press, depending on the results, or calling to insurrection against fascism if the fascists have the majority, or calling to say, don't wait. Because, this question of election, we will have longer discussion about where you put emphasis at this time, in this period. But we had already the experience. The same organization, the same left, in 2017, called to vote for Macron at the second round against Rassemblement National, because it's not coming from nowhere. In 2017, Marine Le Pen was on the second round of the presidential election. Again in 2022, every time with more votes. The result of what is doing the Popular Front now, just calling to vote for Darmanin. Hey, they are intelligent fascists. What did they say? We are the only anti-system force. They are all together against us. They are all in an alliance. They pretended they were fighting Born, they were fighting Darmanin, but now they are all together. And, what I think is that the most terrific things is that they got a little bit less than 11 million votes on the first round. With this policy of the Popular Front, they can have more votes on the second round, because people are so angry against Macron policy and so on. So in this situation, because we have seen it in 2017, 2022, we're arguing against calling to vote for Macron. And everybody in the left was saying, look, first against the fascists, and when we win the election, after we fight Macron. And we're saying, and the fascists, they will disappear? You know, if you look at the polls, the reason why people made their choice at the first round, you know, they are the five first reason. The first one is for every candidate, of the total of candidates, is purchasing power. And the second reason is immigration. In 2017, first presidency, first election for Macron, immigration was not even on the list of the reason why people were voting. In 2022, it was in the fifth position. Now it's in the second one. That the result of the policy of Macron, while they're opening the door to the fascists, immigration now is a big question for everybody. But when you look to the reason for the the electors of Rassemblement National, of course, immigration is a top one, and largely, as a top one. What I mean is that, what will happen on Monday if the fascists are not the majority? The question is solved. And so what I mean is that what we're going to build, and our main priority is to say to people, yes, the main question, there's the fascist dangers. There we are ringing the alarm bell, but it doesn't, not just in the last 15 days, before as well. The main thing, get organized. Get organized in every neighborhood, in every workplaces against the fascists. We don't want the fascists in our workplaces. We don't want the fascists in our neighbors. The basis to do that has to involve the people fighting for international solidarity. It is part of the fight against fascism. And it is strong at the moment, this movement. It is an anti-racist. You can't fight the fascists without fighting racism. So that's the main thing. And arguing, build that resistance. It's a question of defense. Because now, it's mainly an electoral audience. But there are many more members, street fighters, fascist street fighters, and they win confidence. So now, since the first round, the racist attacks by the fascists are multiplying. Okay, you understand. Just to give you an idea of the confidence they have, there were a big street meeting organized by some medias, so with big resources. There were, the trade union leader, the main leader of the CGT was speaking. There were some artists and so on, for freedom and so on. It was not directly against fascism, it was for freedom. When the leader of the CGT, the main trade union, spoke, there were some fascists on the first rank who just had placards suddenly. They came in the middle of thousands of activists, and they had the confidence to come in the middle of what was really good. But that gives an idea of the politics of the leaderships. When it happened, people began to whistle. So Sophie Binet, the leader of the CGT, what did I say that people don't like? You was saying something very good for freedom and so on. In fact, it was because of the placard. And she said, it's a provocation, don't move. Don't say anything. Happily, fortunately, it lasted less than 1 minute. They had to run. They had to live in running. And Sophie Binet had to finish his speech saying no pasaran, which is good. The way even to push our leaders, to push the left, to go this way, without confidence. is to organize people for this kind of politics. You're coming from Germany. We have to say, because that's what is missing in France. Fight the fascist Essen style. You know, in Essen, there were 50,000, 70,000 people who went to say, we don't want them to organize a conference. 15,000 organized before to blockade. There were a mass, rebuilding a mass tradition of saying, we are not what you were saying. With a fascist, it's not a question of debate. We are not debating program against program. With the fascists, it's a question of confrontation. We don't want fascists anywhere. And, that's why the most important thing to build is that. And there are the forces in France at the moment to do it. If we take the initiative, and, on 14th of July, I hope that the demonstration will be big.